So I was watching the X Zone TV channel last night when I was abducted by aliens, and they kept repeating to me over and over again, simultv.com, simultv.com.
What's simultv.com?
That's what I asked them. They had it written on the side of their UFO.
How do you spell that?
UFO.
No, I mean simultv.com.
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 Right. simultv.com.
Interesting that you were abducted by aliens in a simultv.com UFO last night.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Now that you mention it, I remember now last night I was awakened from a deep sleep. My great-grandmother was standing there. She said she'd come from the hereafter to tell me about simultv.com. She even spelled it out for me.
simultv.com, sonny boy.
simultv.com.
simultv.com, sonny boy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Guys, you'll never guess what my psychic guru just told me.
simultv.com.
Exactly. Are you guys psychic too?
Of course.
We all know about simultv.com. simultv.com.
The X Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell is largely an opinion talk show. All opinions, comments, or statements of fact expressed by Rob McConnell's guests are strictly their own and are not to be construed as those of the X Zone Radio Show or endorsed in any manner by Rob McConnell, rel-mar McConnell Media Company, the X Zone Broadcast Network, its affiliated networks, stations, employees, or advertisers.
All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
And welcome back, one and all. This is the X Zone. I am Rob McConnell, coming to you from our broadcast center and studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, on the Talkstar Radio Network, Mutual Broadcast Network, iHeart Radio Network, X Zone Broadcast Network, and Simul Radio and Simul TV. If you'd like to check out the programming we have available for you, 724-365 on the X Zone Broadcast Network, visit www.xzbn.net. And for the X Zone TV channel on Simul TV, that's www.simultv.com, channel 21. And don't forget, starting this coming week, we are going to be on iLaunch TV throughout the United States and 50 countries. And later on this month, we're going to be on Comcast as well. And we're really happy to announce at this time that starting February the 14th, Valentine's Day present for me. Wow. We're going to be on Hamilton TV here in Hamilton, Cable 14 on the Rogers and Cogeco networks. My guests this hour, Exo Nation, are Brian Laythe and Dr. James Houran. Now, Brian is a Ph.D., is an experimental psychologist who has published research in the psychology of religion and ideology, haunting experiences, and anomalous phenomena for the last 18 years. He works as a forensic psychologist as well as being a professor of sociology and psychology. He is also the founder of the Institute for the Study of Religious and Anomalous Experience, a nonprofit dedicated to training undergraduates in the sound research techniques applied to the anomalous studies, as well as the publication of anomalous research. Now, James Houran, we've had on the show before. James is a Ph.D., is a 25-year veteran in applied psychological research, parapsychology, and a published expert on ghosts, haunts, and poltergeists. He has authored over 150 articles and is an award-winning, and his award-winning work has been profiled by a group of media outlets and programs, including the Discovery Channel, A&E, BBC, National Geographic, and so on. He is also the editor of popular academic textbooks, Haunting and Poltergeists, Multidisciplinary Perspectives, and From Shaman to Scientist, Essays on Humanity's Search for Spirits. The website, www.israenet.org. And Jim and Brian, welcome to the X Zone.
Good to be here.
All right, let's cut through the chase, okay, guys? You're both experts. You've been doing this a long time. You've got plenty of media experience. So how would you answer this very fundamental, and I'm sure it's going to be very easy for you to answer. Do ghosts really exist?
I'll let you take that first, Brian.
Oh, okay, yeah. My formal answer, probably as a scientist, would be I'm of the perspective that there is definitely something unexplained that people interpret as ghosts. As to what that is and how that manifests, I think that's up for grabs. But I think Jim might be a little bit more stringent in that definition.
All right, Jim, what's your definition? How would you explain it?
Okay, well, first, Brian is very much an advocate. I think he's very sympathetic to the possibility, anyway, that there could be paranormal agencies.
Right.
And you're going to find him a bit more skeptical. So it's going to be a nice kind of give and take here. I'm going to give you an answer that's probably going to be less satisfying than Brian's. Some people might even say it's a cop-out. But I'm going to say, yes, ghosts exist. Now, there's a comma, and the rest of that sentence, though, is, I believe they exist right now only to the degree of being a social fact, meaning people believe and act on them as if they're real. And in that way, they're the same as music, art, language, even money. But in your question, Rob, I think what you're really trying to ask is, do they exist as some sort of tangible physical forces or entities?
Right.
And that I just simply don't know. I've been looking for that evidence for quite a long time. Haven't found it yet, but I can say that I believe in them as social facts. And so far, that's all I found.
Well, let me ask you this question, Jim. Based on the amount of media exposure and media presence and media hype that ghosts are getting, would this play into the increased social awareness of ghosts and not necessarily in the reality of ghosts?
Well, I think ghosts have haunted us for as long as there's been humankind. They're nothing new, and I think that our awareness of them, yes, has certainly been sparked even more by the plethora of these amateur ghost shows, by different media outlets, online, offline. I mean, ghosts are as popular as they always have been. In fact, we've recently done some studies that show that ghosts as a brand have the same kind of power as Amazon.com or Apple Computer. They're that engaging. They're that popular. They have that much prevalence and potency. So, yes, it certainly feeds into that. But you know what? Even if there wasn't media, even if we didn't have all these ghost shows, ghosts would still be popular because at the end of the day, these experiences are universal. They touch people, whether you're a believer or not, and they have kept us intrigued for millennia, and I don't see that stopping.
But how can it be so popular when there's no evidence to substantiate the reality of their existence?
Well, Brian will probably have some opinion on this, too. Go ahead, Brian.
I would say actually, if we remove some of the social bias and some of the conflict that occurs in society over the field of parapsychology, what we do know is that for 120 years, all the way back to the Society for Psychical Research, there have been very well documented cases, which even from a skeptic perspective, they just haven't been debunked.
Can you give us examples?
Well, I think in the early 20th century, when they were doing the studies of Eusebia Palladino, and literally this poor woman would go through cavity searches and all sorts of tests. They'd hold on to her, and there'd be tables moving around. There'd be manifestations of entire arms. Go up to 95 in the skull experiments, which are debated. And of course, I've even done some studies. One of the earliest studies I published, I was able to capture 7-foot-tall shadows in an empty house with 10 cameras, knowing that the building was empty, knowing that no one was around for a quarter mile. And so for me, the issue of there being evidence of the paranormal, I think there is evidence. I think it's rare. But I don't think it's entirely conjured out of society's mind, so to speak.
How much of the paranormal is actually manifested by the person who is engaged in the actual event compared to an actual paranormal event?
That's a tough question.
I would say that's the million-dollar question, right? And, kind of piggybacking off of Brian, there certainly is evidence. There certainly are incidents. Some are private, They're very subjective, and the other ones are very objective. They're very physical. But these also tend to be ambiguous. There can be many explanations for why people have subjective experiences, or there are physical phenomena that seem to happen. But if there is one thing that I think we've learned in parapsychology, the scientific study of these things, is these experiences center around living people. And, a lot of the researchers really do believe that these incidents, these phenomena, tell us more about the living than the dead, that there is something happening. It's systematic, it's very orderly, and it is centered around living people, which makes you wonder, are they channeling something, or are they causing it? I don't know, but my sense from the studies is that people are probably responsible for them versus people are some passive witnesses to physical forces.
Then if that is the case, how come everyone doesn't experience a paranormal event? There are people who go through life without even thinking about a paranormal event, where you have others who are plagued with paranormal events. How does that occur?
Well, I have two reactions to that. I'm sure Brian has his own. But first off, you can have skeptics and believers that have the same perception. They have a private experience, or they can observe a physical event, but they reach very different conclusions about it for various reasons. But that has been a very perplexing question, Rob. Why do some people perceive ghosts and other people don't?
All right, John.
And we know even in some cases that a person can be experiencing something, yet other people that are also present see or hear nothing at all.
All right, gentlemen,
And
we've got to take our first break. Sorry about that, Jim. We'll continue this thought when we come back. XO Nation, our guests this hour are Brian Laythe and James Houran. The website is www.israenet.com. This is the X Zone. I am Rob McConnell, and we'll all be back on the other side of this break as we continue here in the X Zone from our broadcast center and studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Don't forget, February the 14th here in Hamilton on Cable 14, the X Zone TV show, Tuesday nights and Thursday nights. And also we'll have all the information about how you can watch us throughout the United States and the rest of the world on iLaunch TV and Comcast at www.xzonetv.com. Whether you're a skeptic or a believer, join me, Rob McConnell, as together we'll investigate the world of the paranormal and the science of parapsychology here on the X Zone Radio TV show on XZBN and the X Zone TV channel on Simul TV. Since 1990, the X Zone Radio TV show has been the place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. Together, we'll investigate UFOs, aliens, ghosts, Bigfoot, psychic phenomena, lake monsters, conspiracy theories, government cover-ups, the truth embargo, alien abductions, ESP, haunted locations from around the world, and so much more. With over 28 years of broadcasting and more than 4,500 individual guests, the X Zone is truly a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality, as evidenced by the credibility, integrity, and professionalism of the guests that we bring to our international audience. If you have seen a UFO, had a close encounter, seen a ghost, Bigfoot, lake monster, or a story that you would like to share or have investigated, contact me, Rob McConnell, by sending me your email to xzone@xzoneradiotv.com, or you can call toll-free 1-800-610-7035, extension 143, and on Skype, X Zone Radio TV. For more information on the X Zone Radio TV show with yours truly, Rob McConnell, visit www.xzoneradiotv.com or www.xzonetvchannel.com or simultv.com and xzbn.net. Until next we meet here in the X Zone from our broadcast center and studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, always remember, X Zone Nation, keep your eyes to the sky and your heart in the light.
It's hard to listen to the news without realizing we're living in volatile, unprecedented times. Yet never has there been such an opportunity to transform the human condition. As old structures fail, where can we find the guidance to co-create a better way? Find Your Path Home is an ever-evolving, leading-edge information, education, and healing resource center designed to support and guide you on your path to unity and enlightenment. Based on sound principles employed by shaman worldwide, we provide techniques that can support you through the current transitions, offering online shamanic classes, international long-distance shamanic healing sessions, complimentary Mission Evolution radio episodes and Stairway to Heaven TV vignettes, seminars, retreats, and much more. All of this can be found on findyourpathhome.com.
Welcome back, everyone. This is the X Zone. We have Brian Laythe and James Houran with us this hour. Their website is israenet.org. I'm sorry I had to cut you off there, Jim, but these are hard breaks. They don't give me any leeway, so I apologize. And if you could get back to your answer, it was very interesting.
No, I was just saying that, look, we do know something about why some people experience ghosts and other ones don't. And that really comes down to a psychological profile. It might have something to do with what they're perceiving and their sensitivity to it. And we know that people that tend to have these experiences, whether they're subjective, the more private psychological kind of experiences, or they're perceiving physical events, these are people that score higher on something called transliminality, which basically means how easily does information, whether that's thoughts, feelings, affect, flow between the conscious mind and the unconscious mind? So these people have a greater sensitivity to what's happening in their own bodies as well as what's happening in the environment.
And we know this how? Like, how is this testing done? How many people were tested to come up with this conclusion?
Well, it wasn't just one study. It's been several studies in actual field conditions as well as large-scale surveys.
All right.
But, Brian, maybe this is a good point for you to talk about one of the recent studies we just published.
Yeah, actually, we just did a study where we were looking at people who reported haunt experiences, and were able to give them several scales and profiles. And more importantly, we were able to split that study in two. And use and test both groups. Approximately 400. Is that right, Jim, or is it more like 350?
You're in the 300 range, which is actually pretty good for certain social science research.
Yeah, and we wanted to see to what extent did personality factors as well as belief systems in terms of did you believe in the paranormal, and of course transliminality actually predict these haunting experiences. And in a nutshell, what we found was it was really just a belief in kind of New Age philosophy and transliminality that was the only reliable and sustained predictors of people reporting what they thought to be was a haunting experience.
So could we call them ghost psychics?
Whoa. Yeah, it's a cool name. I don't know if we'd want to go that far. I think, I would add to what Jim is saying, transliminality, I very much bought into transliminality in the last couple of years, having read the research and had the luck to meet Jim. But being a social psychologist and coming from another background, a lot of this has to do with belief and what people want to believe and what they want to see. And although it's not common, we have to remember that although it's not popular for us to think about, there are effects like confirmation bias and belief perseverance, well established in the psychology literature, that basically says if it's against our belief, we don't care if it's fact and we don't care if it's evidence. We're going to tend to minimize that so we can support our existing belief systems.
So would that apply would that apply to religious beliefs as well?
Oh, absolutely. More so in some ways. Religious belief and really any strong belief, the stronger it is, the more resistant people are typically to information that's contrary or an interpretation of events that's contrary to what they believe. Add with that transliminality, and you do see a scenario where the right kind of beliefs and the right sort of mental processes are going to make it more likely for a person to have what they believe to be a haunting experience, both in the subjective domains and possibly the objective domain, so actual physical events.
All right, so how would we explain people who report the feeling of being touched by an unseen entity when, if you can't see the entity, if it has no weight, it has no mass, how can it actually touch? Is this something that the person wants to happen? And if not, how do we prove that it really did happen?
Well, that's another $1 million question, Rob. So you're on a roll tonight. Well, for one thing, let me just go back to your phrase, ghost psychic. I wouldn't use that phrase at all. I wouldn't use that term. I wouldn't even say psychic. But I would say sensitive.
Okay.
What we mean when we say someone has a high degree of transliminality, it means they're very sensitive to changes in their internal environments, what's happening in their body,
right,
as well as any perceived changes in the physical environment. And they also give more credence. They give more importance to those changes. They find them very meaningful. So they're responding to something, but I can't tell you why someone might feel like they're being touched on the shoulder or have other kinds of somatic feelings. But we know that's a very common reporting in haunts and poltergeist kinds of things. That and the feeling of being watched, what we call the sense presence.
Sure. Well, let me ask
but
you.
But you know what? I can also induce that just through suggestion.
Right. This is what I was going to get. Sure.
And get the same sorts of things.
Yeah. So how do we know that the people that are so sensitive to the changes within, so to speak, are not actually getting a different physiological reaction to the environment that they are perceiving this to be a haunting?
The short answer is we don't. In the question that you asked, I've done several years of field work where I've set up lab conditions, and you remind me of a scenario where I had a colleague that I trained as an undergraduate. She reported being punched in the ovaries, and she vomited in a haunted location. And I've actually had several of those experiences over the years, and I'm sure Jim would agree with me on this, is I almost always tend to lean towards that being a kind of a psychosomatic reaction,
right?
Someone working themselves up. At the same time, though, as a pure scientist, I have to say, if that state is internal to the person, there's no way to objectively figure out if that was suggestion, them, the environment, or if you want to make the claim an anomalous force. So it's really, subjective experiences are incredibly difficult by any objective sense to tease out in terms of their source.
So this would apply to any aspect of the paranormal, whether it's Bigfoot, UFOs, alien abductions, the sighting of the Loch Ness Monster, and so on.
Well, we've always set the standard, though. Hallucinations are possible, although I think in many cases that's exaggerated. I think we tend to use the hallucination excuse way too much. But when we have stuff on video and audio in controlled conditions or compared conditions, and you still see those things, now we're dealing with kind of a different bird, because obviously an electronic device picked up some sort of perturbance, some sort of reflection of light waves. Of course, the question is, after that, what is it?
And the question after that is, was that file manipulated?
True.
Yeah. So how do we
I think, Rob, it all comes down to, regardless of what people cite as evidence for ghosts or hauntings or these kinds of things, I would argue that it's ultimately ambiguous. It could have many different possible causes. There's many possible interpretations. The paranormal is just one attribution people can give to it, but it's not the only interpretation. And I think that's what makes this field so frustrating in a sense, is I don't believe there's any black and white, cut and dried evidence that says, yes, this is indisputably the paranormal at play versus some sort of conventional hypothesis, even if we don't have the technology or the science understanding yet to know that it's normal. It can still look very magical to us, but that's what's so frustrating. It's not like in the movies where Hollywood portrays hauntings and ghosts as, my God, you'd have to be an idiot not to realize there's a demon in the house, or that this is being caused by some entity of sorts. No, in the real world where these things happen, They often tend to be more subtle, more mundane, almost benign. People can have some pretty strong reactions to the events, but I tend to find that they're more likely than not to be very ambiguous events that people are interpreting as paranormal.
All right, give our listeners an example
of ambiguous stimuli.
Yes,
okay.
Ambiguous haunting.
Well, I'll tell you what. Let me flip that a little bit, Rob.
Okay.
What do you think is probably a universal sign or symptom that your house is haunted?
I don't believe in haunting, so you're asking the wrong person.
Well, but you have seen books, you've seen movies, you've seen documentaries.
Yeah.
What is a common event that people cite as, see, that's evidence that the house is haunted?
All right, let's say a door opening by itself, a window closing, a blind going up, unknown sounds, unknown
a physical
sense.
event.
Right.
Yes. Okay, a door opening or closing. Okay, well, first we know from research on poltergeist cases, historical and more modern, that fraud often occurs in such cases. It's not necessarily for monetary gain. It can be children, for example, that are looking for attention.
Right.
But we know that people cause these things to happen and try to deceive other people to thinking that it's paranormal. On the other hand, I did a field study for National Geographic at the Eastern State Penitentiary Prison in Philadelphia. Super uber creepy place. And we actually had a physicist from Fermi Labs there as well as part of our team who can demonstrate that certain physical stress effects can cause a door to suddenly move open, but it looks like it's been touched by a ghostly hand. So there's drafts. There's all sorts of reasons why a door can suddenly move, apparently on its own accord, or where physical things can happen. But ghost is probably down on the list of what's probably causing that to happen.
All right, we're going to have a cliffhanger here. We're going to have a cliffhanger because I do have to take my news break. Exo Nation, our guests this hour are Brian Laythe and James Houran. The website is www.islae.net.org, and we'll be back on the other side of this break as we continue here in the X-Zone from our broadcast center and studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Don't go away.
They are here, and they've been here for thousands of years, making their presence known in the shadows. They might be seen by a lonely motorist on a deserted road late at night, or by a frightened and confused husband in the bedroom he is sharing with his wife. But who are they? What do they want? Why are they here? Perhaps most concerning, has the government been aware of their presence all along? The new book by Elie Marzulli, UFO Disclosure, the 70-year cover-up exposed, delves into the world of UFOs. Can full disclosure be soon? Order now and receive a free hour and 37-minute DVD on the UFO phenomenon. UFOs are real. Get both the book and the DVD, a $40 value, for only $19.99. To order your book and DVD today, go to lamarzulli.net. That's LAMARZULLI.net.
Rob McConnell here, presenting an overview for Nicholas Paul Jennings, author of a fascinating book, Amen. It presents facts revealed by Egyptologists, facts that enable us to understand why Amen is the beginning of creation of God. It provides recommendations for religious leaders of the major religions to unify their beliefs and teach the Word of God. Love one another. Amen informs people how mankind conceived God. It was the Egyptians that developed the concepts of a soul, a hereafter, and Son of God. And finally, after the worship of many gods, they conceived the belief in one universal God, the maker of all there is. For more information, visit www.futureofgodamen.com. That's www.futureofgodamen.com. myriad.com.
We're talking about ghosts this hour here in the X Zone. Our two guests are Brian Laythe and James Houran. The website is www.israenet.org. I understand where you're going with the draft of the psychokinesis and other things. So how can we then, knowing this, actually say that what people are perceiving to be a paranormal event is actually a paranormal event? Like, what are the statistics in this? Out of 100 people who claim to have a paranormal event happening, what is the percentage of people actually having a real unknown event happening?
Brian, you want to take a stab at that one?
Yeah, I would put that, having done probably about maybe 35 to 45 field investigations over 7 years, I'd really say about 90 to 95% of the stuff that you're going to see has at least 1 to 2 reliable alternate explanations. I would say maybe 5 to 10% tops of events have components to them that are really difficult to explain.
And what would those components be that are difficult to explain?
In my instance, I mean, I've actually seen objects move off of shelves on their own. I've seen kind of explosive movement. I've also seen subtle movement of trigger objects move by themselves, even after they were tested, and you tapped on the base of where they were and knocked all around. I've actually seen videotape of a place. I've seen 3-foot gout of fire shoot up. Believe it or not. I mean, could it have been hoax? Sure. But no, there is weird stuff out there. It's just relatively rare. And again, I'm not making a claim of what it actually is. I don't think you can make a definitive claim. But high strangeness, so to speak, does occur, in my opinion, just not that frequently.
So why is the establishment of the reason so important to so many?
I think a lot of the mess that we get into when we talk about ghosts and parapsychology has very little to do with actually doing good science, and maybe a lot more sometimes to do with people wanting to justify what they believe already.
Okay.
And, as any of us have sat around the dinner table in a political discussion, that can be a very heated, contentious debate. And I think sometimes it obscures our ability to collect good evidence and get to the bottom of some of these things.
What do you think the possibility of the interest in ghosts, hauntings, angels, UFOs has to do with the amount of negativity that a person faces during their daily life, that this is kind of like a therapy for them? It's just like going on a roller coaster, getting that adrenaline thrill.
For a person who, didn't evince, obvious psychological disorders, I don't think most people would want to deal with believing in a ghost, because I think in many cases they subject themselves to ridicule, and in some cases fear, anxiety, various other side effects. So I'm not sure that the escape mechanism is a catch-all explanation. I think for some groups, yes. If you're familiar with cosplayers or people that are very deeply into fantasy, I think it very much might be the case that that's a thrill and excitement for them. And I might even go so far to say that some of the ghost enthusiasts or ghost hunting groups are really out there trying to live that excitement, so to speak.
So are they...
not all of them, obviously.
The vast majority that I've had on this show, that's exactly, a great number of them have never had a paranormal experience. They want one. They want to be part of the crowd, part of the thrill, the excitement. You've got to wonder, like, I'm sorry, there should be 6 cans in that 6-pack, but there's only 4. It's it's scary sometimes to hear the way they talk, and wow, the stories they tell. It's just unbelievable. And I think that this does a lot of harm to the serious researchers like both of you, who are doing your very best to try and understand what is going on. Like, my hat is off to you, Brian and James. It really is. You're up against a curve and a wall. In fact, if Donald Trump had you guys working on his team, is what would already be made. But
there you go.
Yeah. So, the
fact is, Rob, that these experiences, people think of them often in terms of the supernatural and parapsychology,
right.
But you actually can find a lot of good mainstream research on these kinds of experiences that tie to new angles in physics, environmental psychology, witness psychology. I mean, the fact that these are such dramatic, universal experiences that have crossed historical eras, it is a universal human experience when we say ghosts and hauntings and poltergeists. And they're so dramatic that we can learn a lot about just orthodox science without even having to worry about, is there something paranormal? There's so much to be learned just in normal human psychology and physiology and what's going on in the environment, that it's fascinating to study just for what it tells us about normal conventional science.
Then why are there not more scientists involved in the investigation of this phenomenon?
Well, there are, but they would probably say, I've dealt a lot with, I'm going to call them mainstream scientists. They would say, yeah, that's really interesting, but you know what's more interesting? Quantum physics, finding a cure for cancer, renewable energy sources. I mean, let's face it, there's some practical application from the study of these things that relate to how buildings can be designed, the physics of things, how do you deal with witnesses and their accounts and testimony. But they would probably say there's bigger, more urgent problems facing the world than, why is your house haunted?
I had a gentleman on the show before you two gentlemen joined us, and he was telling us about a house in West Wales. He was in Wales when we did the interview with him. And the amount of physical haunting that went on in that house, it's, I'm sorry, it put the Amityville horror to shame. And yet he believes it so much, and it was corroborated by those who lived in that house before him, as well as those who lived in the house after him. Now, if something like this is happening, I don't understand why more people are not investigating this, because it's unreal, it's not normal, and if it was just one person reporting this type of haunting, you could understand it and, make rational explanations for it. But when you get these cases where there is a lot of physical as well as emotional attachment to the case, he was telling us that it was the negativity within the unit between him and his girlfriend grew. It caused a split between him and his girlfriend. He started being a heavy drinker, turned into an alcoholic with deep depression. To me, if this is really happening, we need to take a serious look at this, because I think at this point here, it's more important than quantum physics and, making better buildings, because people are being affected in a way that should be taken care of.
I would agree with that sentiment 100%. I mean, and I think if I was just going to guesstimate, the number of well-documented high PK, RSPK cases, I'd say there've been at least 100 over the last 120 years.
Right.
But I'm gonna shoot the elephant in the room and add to, being someone who works in academia, you do not gather favors in academia by trying to study anything paranormal. It is a very taboo subject still in a lot of universities, and it can result in, shall we say, mildly prejudice while you're working. And I think that also inhibits people.
And this is the same academia that is still teaching our youth that Christopher Columbus discovered the Americas. Like, I think academia is legends in their own mind many times, because they're wrong. They make mistakes.
Pshaw, sir. Nobody makes mistakes.
But luckily, science is supposed to be a self-correcting enterprise. But, Rob, I would argue that actually there's a lot of researchers in mainstream science that study these things. They just don't study them under the term of haunted house. There's a whole field of science that deals with what we call mass psychogenic illness or sick building syndrome.
Yes.
That's a haunted house, but by a different name. or people that are acoustics experts, understanding how things like infrasound can cause issues in people's health and well-being in normal everyday environments. The whole study of electromagnetic fields. Yes, it's quite popular due to people like Michael Persinger, may he rest in peace. And its influence on things like the temporal lobe causing micro-seizures and the feeling of being watched in apparitions. But that work went beyond Michael Persinger, and you have others studying these field effects. So I would argue that there is a subsection of mainstream academia from different disciplines that are looking at these phenomena, but they don't jump to the conclusion, or they don't even start with the premise that we're dealing with the paranormal. They're starting with the premise of, there's some weird things people are reporting. Let's see if we can understand scientifically what's going on. And they come from it from their own points of view, from their background and their training in science. But this stuff is being studied, just not to the same extent as, say, cancer or quantum physics.
All right, stand by, gentlemen. We have to take our final break. Exo Nation, our two guests this hour, Brian Laythe and James Houran. If you'd like to find out more, visit www.israenet.org, and we'll be back on the other side of this break as we wrap up this hour here in the X Zone from our broadcast center and studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. I'm Rob McConnell. Don't go away.
Of the X Zone? Now watch it on Simul TV, plus 500 video games, live TV channels, free video on demand, worldwide, and more. Does this sound like tomorrow's television? Well, it is, but you can have it today, right now. It is Simul TV. Simul TV offers what the others only wish they could provide. 15 exclusive channels like X Zone, sci-fi, and horror. We are worldwide. No other provider offers that. 500 built-in video games. No need to have an extra expensive system. We have them included. Free video on demand. Live streaming events from around the world. Interactive online network, and much more. Tomorrow's TV today. Simul TV. Sound too good to be true? Well, it's not. You can have Simul TV today. Sign up at simultv.com. Do it today.
They are here, and they've been here for thousands of years, making their presence known in the shadows. They might be seen by a lonely motorist on a deserted road late at night, or by a frightened and confused husband in the bedroom he is sharing with his wife. But who are they? What do they want? Why are they here? Perhaps most concerning, has the government been aware of their presence all along? The new book by L.A. Marzulli, UFO Disclosure, the 70-year cover-up exposed, delves into the world of UFOs. Can full disclosure be soon? Order now and receive a free hour and 37-minute DVD on the UFO phenomenon. UFOs are real. Get both the book and the DVD, a $40 value, for only $19.99. To order your book and DVD today, go to lamarzulli.net. That's LAMARZULLI.net.
So I was watching the X Zone TV channel last night when I was abducted by aliens, and they kept repeating to me over and over again, simultv.com, simultv.com.
What's simultv.com?
That's what I asked them. They had it written on the side of their UFO.
How do you spell that?
UFO.
No, I mean simultv.com.
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 Right. simultv.com.
Interesting that you were abducted by aliens in a simultv.com UFO last night.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Now that you mention it, I remember now last night I was awakened from a deep sleep. My great-grandmother was standing there. She said she'd come from the hereafter to tell me about simultv.com. She even spelled it out for me.
simultv.com, sonny boy.
simultv.com.
simultv.com, sonny boy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Guys, you'll never guess what my psychic guru just told me.
SIMULTV.com.
Exactly. Are you guys psychic too?
Of course.
We all know about SimulTV.com. SIMULTV.com.
Exonation, Brian Laythe and James Houran are our guests this hour. First of all, gentlemen, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. As I told you during the break, I have thoroughly enjoyed this hour, and we have an open invitation for both of you to come back at any time. But let me ask you this. Is it possible that the paranormal investigators or the ghost hunters that are out there with all their little gadgets, all their little green shaky night vision, wearing the black t-shirts and trying to look ominous, are actually casting a negative connotation onto the research of credible parapsychologists and psychologists like you and Brian?
Of course. I mean that's another elephant in the room, but of course, what they're doing, and they might be quite sincere, but what they're doing is not science, and what they do is not what parapsychologists do.
Right.
We test hypotheses, we know how to use the equipment that we're using, and we try to control the environment and control for variables rather than just go into a room and wait for something to happen. We go in trying to rule out issues and variables and test hypotheses. So it is completely different, and yes, it does get frustrating. On the other hand, and I think Brian will touch on this, you know what? The group of ghost hunters far outnumbers that of parapsychologists.
Oh, definitely.
And they obviously have energy and passion for the same topic, and there can be the opportunity for a constructive collaboration if it's done correctly.
All right, can I use this example that it's like a security guard who wants to be a policeman, the ghost hunter who really wants to investigate and do parapsychology?
I don't know that that's accurate, and Brian can jump in here, but I don't see ghost hunters as wanting to be parapsychologists. I think that they kind of rebel against us as well.
Really?
I think that think for them, they're trying to validate what they already believe rather than discover what the facts are.
Gotcha.
And two, there is a social element to it. I equate them more to the Civil War enactment people.
Okay.
That get together and then they play a part and they get absorbed in that role. But for them, it's about status.
Yeah.
They can be very big fish in a small pond, and they can promote themselves and be media personalities. And those are quite different motivations than why parapsychologists study these things.
And I have a lot of respect for parapsychologists and psychologists. A lot of respect, because you guys are, like I said, up against the wall. Brian, what's your take?
I was going to say, I'd kind of like to jump in here and say I agree with Jim 90%, but I think it is worth saying I have met individuals who don't happen to have Ph.D.s in a science who have taken the time to learn the scientific method, to apply basic protocols for controls. And is it perfect science? No, but I have occasionally run into groups that have taken it upon themselves to educate themselves in the scientific method, in the procedure, because, that's the biggest myth. It's not the gadget, it's the method. Science will be better done with a slide rule than a calculator if the person knows what they're doing. So I just want to add that, I think Jim is absolutely right generally in the caricature of a lot of these groups. But there are some out there that are genuinely trying to do the best they can, self-taught, trying to do science and collect data. I would also say that we don't make it easy as parapsychologists to get to the academic literature. I don't think there's a lot of good resources out there for them to educate themselves if they wanted to. And I think if we're ever going to tap and create that collaboration, we have to start reaching a handout and offering, non-threatening methods of training, because, in theory, no other field of science has, 2 million people running around trying to do in their own way what parapsychologists are doing, and I think it's a shame that we're not finding a way to make a bridge.
So where do you see parapsychology, or not parapsychology, but ghost research in 5-10 years from now?
I think Jim probably be better for that one.
Well, I would say, look, this is moving into two areas. Mm-hmm. One is it's clearly moving to the domain of physicists, not wannabe physicists, but real physicists. And then secondly, I think we're going to start seeing a change, an evolution of focusing on different types of scientific instruments. Right now we use the gadgets that blink and make sounds and look cool on TV, but there's other kinds of scientific instruments known as psychometrics. Mm-hmm. In other words, psychological assessments. And this really moves towards the area of witness psychology.
Right.
Because we don't have ghosts to study. We only have reports of ghosts. And parapsychology is not the study of the paranormal, it's the study of the evidence cited for the paranormal. So we are 2, 3, 4 steps away from whatever that source material is.
Right.
So I think that combination of this stuff being studied by real legitimate physicists, mm-hmm. and then us moving more towards the witness psychology angle is really where this is headed.
The work that is being done by the amateur, is this a big problem when it comes to getting credible members of the scientific community involved?
Yes. In a nutshell, yes.
Yeah.
Because if there is prejudice in your workplace, I mean, let's be honest here. No one wants to threaten the food that they put on their kid's table for something that they're passionate about or interested in. That's a big risk. And reputation matters and things matter. So I think a lot of times getting more people involved, they have to get past that risk. And I'm not sure we're in the best environment yet for that, although I think it's coming around. I think it's softening a bit.
But after all these years...
Well, I would add this, though. Rob, I would add this, and that is when we did the National Geographic special, mm-hmm. we brought together a team of actual scientists from acoustics, physics,
right,
architecture. We did a real study. Now, there were some ghost hunters there, but the reason that we got some pretty powerful academics involved was because they were concerned about public education in science. And they saw an opportunity, actually, to counter some of the theories or untested ideas that the ghost hunters were portraying.
Right.
And because it was done by a responsible organization and a platform like National Geographic, mm-hmm. the fact that ghost hunters were there actually helped attract the academics to say, let's give a counterpoint to all of this. Let's actually show the public and these groups the right way of going about this.
So what was the finding, the final conclusion of this National Geographic special?
Well, that there were two issues that seemed to be at play. Now, I'm not saying this generalizes at all to every case.
Right.
And we were only able to study the environment and people in the environment for a few nights. But we had access to control a lot of variables, test hypotheses, and so it was quite a different kind of field study. Plus, we had the latest equipment. And as I said, where I think this whole domain is going is physics and witness psychology. That's exactly what was found in that study. We found that there's a physical variable known as infrasound, that the building, just by probably happenstance, mm-hmm. that the way that it was constructed basically acted like an echo chamber. And you add on top of that traffic around the prison, airplanes and flight patterns over the prison, it basically was vibrating. And infrasound is simply a very low-level hum, a hum that you can't hear, but you feel it, and it's very uncomfortable. And you put people in parts of the prison where the infrasound is being generated, that's where the ghost reports were. But the people that gave the most credence to those experiences, mm-hmm. And the people that detected that most easily were the people that had higher levels of transdimensionality and paranormal belief. The witnesses that we brought in that had not been to that location before, the ones that were lower on those psychological characteristics, they reported much less or less intense kinds of experiences. So to me, that's showing you that, at least in this case,
right.
physics plus witness psychology produce these kinds of reports in a consistent way. And the environment certainly would suggest this place is freaking haunted. If you've ever been there, it is creepy. But I found that those general principles do apply to other cases, but they may not apply to all. And so people like Brian and I, we're still searching.
Brian, we've got a minute left. I'll give this final minute to you.
I would just probably add, to Jim's commentary. I think it's perfectly sound.
Mm-hmm.
I think somewhere in the environment plays a role. I think psychology plays a role. I think we need to emphasize field research, and I think that's what Jim's referring to with bringing physicists out, because so much of this stuff in parapsychology has been done in the lab. But when it comes to hauntings, all of the action is not going to happen in the laboratory. So until we get more people out doing good field laboratory conditions, collecting data psychologically, physically, environmentally, I don't think we're even going to have a base model from which to really move forward and get answers.
Gentlemen, first of all, thank you so much for being on the show tonight. It's been a great pleasure. The door is always open. Brian, how can listeners find out more about you and Brian and the work that you do?
Actually, most of my background information is on isranet.org. We keep the nonprofit going, and try to use it for the good of students and publishing research.
All right, gentlemen, thank you so much for being with us tonight on Exo Nation. Once again, the website is www.israenet.org. I'll be back on the other side of this commercial break with the news as we continue. Once again, here in the X Zone from our broadcast center and studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Online, you can check us out at www.xzbn.net. For the X Chronicles newspaper, it's xchroniclesnewspaper.com. And for the X Zone radio show, www.xzoneradiotv.com. I'll be back on the other side of the news. Don't go away.
They are here, and they've been here for thousands of years, making their presence known in the shadows. They might be seen by a lonely motorist on a deserted road late at night, or by a frightened and confused husband in the bedroom he is sharing with his wife. But who are they? What do they want? Why are they here? Perhaps most concerning, has the government been aware of their presence all along? The new book by Elie Marzulli, UFO Disclosure, the 70-year cover-up exposed, delves into the world of UFOs. Can full disclosure be soon? Order now to receive a free hour and 37-minute DVD on the UFO phenomenon. UFOs are real. Get both the book and the DVD, a $40 value, for only $19.99. To order your book and DVD today, go to lamarzulli.net. That's LAMARZULLI.net.
If you are looking for a safe, zero-calorie natural option to the harmful artificial sweeteners on the market today, Just Like Sugar is what you're looking for. Just Like Sugar is a wonderful natural alternative for those health-conscious people who choose a calorie-restricted diet with a great, pure, sweet flavor that tastes just like sugar. Just Like Sugar is a great natural option for people suffering from diabetes and may be useful in restricted diet programs where standard sugars are not allowed and does not cause a laxative effect of some other sweeteners. Just Like Sugar comprises a perfect blend of chicory root fiber, natural calcium, natural vitamin C, and Just Like Sugar's sweetness comes from the natural flavors from the peel of the orange. Just Like Sugar is a natural alternative to harmful artificial sweeteners and will change the way that you believe all natural sweetener products taste. Just Like Sugar is available at your local Whole Foods markets, Wild Oats markets, Henry's, Sun Harvest, and many other fine natural food stores in the U.S., Canada, and worldwide.
You have heard of the X Zone? Now watch it on Simul TV, plus 500 video games, live TV channels, free video on demand, worldwide, and more. Does this sound like tomorrow's television? Well, it is, but you can have it today, right now. It is Simul TV. Simul TV offers what the others only wish they could provide. 15 exclusive channels like X Zone, Sci-Fi, and Horror. We are worldwide. No other provider offers that. 500 built-in video games. No need to have an extra expensive system. We have them included. Free video on demand. live streaming events from around the world, interactive online network, and much more. Tomorrow's TV today. Simul TV. Sound too good to be true? Well, it's not. You can have Simul TV today. Sign up at simultv.com. Do it today.